Hello, my name is Steve Waldron, and I'm the GIS coordinator and instructor here in the city of Richmond. You know, some of us frequently deal with tables or spreadsheets of data that includes address location information in it. The purpose of this video is to teach our users how to create a GIS point layer in ArcGIS Online. We assume that you've already completed the following two videos before proceeding: the Introduction to ArcGIS Online Part 1 course and the Introduction to ArcGIS Online Onboarding Part 2. So having said that, let's begin and learn how to geocode address tables in ArcGIS Online. What is needed to geocode? Well, first of all, you have to have your business data with an address field. This data will reside in an Excel table or a CSV table. The second thing you'll need is a GIS locator, which is being provided for you in ArcGIS Online. This slide shows the four basic steps. The first thing you'll have to do is review and clean up the source table to make it geocodable. We'll talk about this in more detail later. The second thing you have to do is use the Add Item feature in ArcGIS Online to add the table into your ArcGIS Online workspace. I'll be demoing exactly how this is performed. The third thing is you have to fill out the parameters for geocoding the table. This would be the tool that you are prompted to fill out. And optionally, you can rematch any unmatched address records that are discovered. From this point forward, I will be going through the slide, and then I will be toggling over into ArcGIS Online to demo the steps that are outlined on each slide. So for beginners, this slide shows you where the Add Item feature is in your workspace. Under Content, you'll find the Add Item button here. When you click Add Item, you're going to be prompted with this dialog. More than likely, the data is going to be in an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file on your computer. So you will choose File. You'll navigate to where that file is and select it. You'll have to give the name of your new GIS layer a title. You have to give it a name. Going along with the metadata, as you know, you have to provide some tag words. And under Locate Features By, you should use addresses. For the locator, under Using, you should choose Richmond Locator. And then we recommend the source table that you prepare uses a field name called address that contains your address locations. And down here for the time zone, we should leave it as UTC. This will be the default setting. And then you'll click Add Item. So I'm going to jump into ArcGIS Online and show you how this works. For today's demo, I'm going to be using a table of ABC licenses, which I downloaded from the internet from the Virginia ABC website. It's public info. So I downloaded all the ABC licenses, and then I cleaned the table up. I removed any of the locations that were not in the city of Richmond, and I have that table available for use in this demo on my desktop. So here I am. I'm logged in. You can see my name. I'm in my workspace. Here's the content. And here's the Add Item button. So I'm going to click on it. I have a folder, by the way, called Demo Geocoding. So I'm going to add the item from my computer. I need to choose the file. So I know I have this file under a particular folder on my computer. Here it is. It's a spreadsheet called Geocode Demo. For the title, I'm going to leave this as the name. For tags, I'm not going to be very creative. I'm just going to use the word demo ABC. I'll be deleting this information when I'm done with the training session. Okay, I'm going to come down here. I'm locating features by address. I'm going to use which locator? I'm going to choose to use the Richmond locator. And then down here, it's a review of location fields. So I need to tell it which cell to use. And as we can see, address is identified as the address or place location field. I'm going to leave the time zone alone, and I'm going to add this item. Here we will see in the thumbnail section that the data is being processed. And I get a statement here that 907 out of 907 locations were matched. Well, that's great. You won't always get such great results as this. And if you don't, for example, if it said 900 out of 907 locations were matched, in such a situation, that would mean 7 of the records couldn't be mapped for some reason. The system didn't recognize the address and couldn't find a location. And you can go back and rematch those manually, interactively, if you wish. But for our purposes here, we're going to go with what we've got. We've got a 100% match. So do you want to review the matched locations? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. So what it's doing is it's taking that new layer and it's adding it to a web map for me. I'm going to save my work. I'm going to call it Steve's Demo. For tags, I'm not going to be creative again. I'm just going to use the word demo. For summary, we'll say ABC licenses were geocoded. And I'm going to save it in my demo geocoding folder, which I pointed out earlier. I'm going to go back to my presentation. So as you saw, after you add the item and you fill out the geocode form and you process it, ArcGIS Online is going to give you a success rate, so you know how well the data was mapped. And a new layer will be added, and you can open it in the map viewer to preview it. Something I want to point out and remind you of is that you've created a new GIS layer. And you'll remember we said in our intro courses that metadata is very important. So you should be sure to go into the overview page for your GIS layer and update your metadata. Make sure you provide a good description about the data. You know, where did it come from? What is it? Anything a user might need to know. And so as a reminder, well, let's go back to the data we just mapped. You'll recall from our intro course, we showed you how you can thematically map data by the data layer's attributes. So let's take a look at the geocoded point layer. Let's look at its attribute table. So I'm going to click over here on Show Table. And we can see the attributes. So we've got a license number, establishment type. Looks like we've got restaurants and breweries and grocery stores. We've got types of licenses. So we've got like wine and beer off-premise, on and off premise, etc. We have descriptions, we have the trade name, we have the address, of course. So look at all these attributes. Let's go ahead and map these by the establishment type. So I'm going to go up to my layer. I'm going to choose change style. And we want to map these by the establishment type is what we decided. So the system will just pick its own colors. We could always go in and change these colors if we don't like the choices that the system has made, but we'll take what we've got. So any red points, those are restaurants. Breweries are orange. Drugstores are brown, etc. So I'll hit done. And I'll zoom in and look at that. Your point layer can be displayed thematically using any of the attributes. Let me show you a nice base map you can use that really helps highlight your point data. By default, we're using what's called a community base map underneath, but we can change the base map to use what's called the light gray canvas. I like the light gray canvas because it detracts from the underlying base map so that the layer on top can be highlighted. Here, it's much easier to see the points and the colors of these points. Notice we can click on these points and we see all the attribute values. You guys could go and you could configure a pop-up for the information that you want displayed. We learned how to do that in the introduction classes. So let me hit save. And you guys have seen how you can take a table, a spreadsheet, for example, that has address-based data, and we can use the locator to create a new GIS layer. Now I've got an interactive map, and I can share this with my customers so that they can go in and they can interactively work with and analyze the data. Moving right along, let's go back and talk about how to prepare address data for geocoding. So I said at the very beginning, many of us are frequently working with spreadsheets or tables that are, they might be formatted in a certain way because the person that created them is displaying them in a pretty report style. So over here on the left is an example. So perhaps the spreadsheet looks like this, and we've got the person who created it has community center locations, elementary after-school programs, middle schools, YMCAs. And they've got spaces, they've got multiple headings appearing in the same column. It's good and legible, but this isn't going to be geocodable. Your database table, your table, must be in a database format to make it usable. So in other words, make it look like the table on the right-hand side. You can't have blank rows. You can't have multiple headings in the same column. You should have a column and a cell populated in every row. Okay, so in this case, we were dealing with community centers, middle schools, etc. The proper way to do this would be to have a column that identifies the type. So you might have community centers, you could have elementary schools, you could have YMCA locations, and then their address and their organization name. Okay, so make sure you format it like a database table. Here's another problem that will creep into the data that you're provided. What's wrong with the top table here is that it's got different values for X's. So sometimes it's a capital X, sometimes it's an indicator with a lowercase x, sometimes it's just a blank space. So remember when I went in and I thematically mapped the ABC licenses, I did it by establishment type. Well, in that table, always spelled exactly the same. It always used a capital and lowercase setting that was identical throughout. If you were to try to thematically map data using flag indicators like the letter X, these are considered two different things. So when you try to map them, the system, you cannot make them recognize them as being the same because they are different. The other thing that's wrong with this is that there's another header here in the same column. So that should not belong there. This row cannot exist. Here's how this should be done. My recommendation is don't have any blank spaces, be consistent, and standardize what's being used in the table. So it's far better to use like a yes/no indicator. So for example, Battery Park Community Center has academic services, athletic, no cultural, and they do include mentoring. So I've indicated this with a capital Y or capital N for no, not provided. So be consistent, and this is a standard thing that you'll probably have to do with data. Moving forward, let's talk about formatting table roles. The top row of your table, that's designated for your field names. Field names must start with a letter. Okay, don't start a field name with a number. The system isn't going to work. Field names must contain only letters, numbers, and underscores. Do not use spaces. So for example, someone might have a field name, tree space size. Well, that is not preferable. You should use an underscore to separate the two words. In databases, we don't use spaces in the field names. That's a bad practice, so don't do it. Field names and cell values must not use periods or hyphens or commas or quotations. So you may have to do some cleanup in your address field to search and replace and get rid of these special type of characters. Field names should be short and concise. So don't have extremely long field names in your table. Okay, the column data really must be consistently formatted. So on the left-hand side, we're going to see examples of poorly formatted, inconsistently formatted data versus the right-hand side, which is consistent and good. So if we're dealing with dates, here's an example where we've got different formats of dates. Okay, if you wanted to thematically map or analyze information by date, the system's not going to know what to do with all these different formatted dates. Be consistent, stick with one format. This is the best format to use right here. If you're using true, false, or flag indicators, okay, this is bad. They spell true out sometimes they use a letter, sometimes it's lowercase, sometimes it's upper. This is terrible. It's not going to be usable for when you want to thematically map or analyze your data. So use a capital T and a capital F as an example, or use a capital Y and a capital N for yes, no. Whatever it is, just be consistent about the way you do it. Here's another example. Abbreviating elementary, sometimes it's all caps, sometimes it's abbreviated, sometimes it's spelled out, but not all caps. So be consistent. Also, make it easy on yourself. How about the field that contains the address locations? Why don't you name that address? And that will make it easy. The system will see that word and apply it automatically when you're filling out the add item dialog. Quick word, the following types of address values in your table are not going to be mappable. Sometimes people put in a range like 900-1000 East Broad, like as though that was a stretch or block or something. The system can't map that. That's not an address. PO boxes can't be mapped. The city doesn't track the locations of PO boxes. Sometimes people will see the word block, like the 1,000 block. That's not an address. And just a FYI, subunits, they'll map if you have a subunit included, but they are not beneficial. You don't need to include them in the address field that you're trying to geocode by. Perhaps you could use that in a secondary column, and then you can use it for labeling and identifying features, but it doesn't need to be in the field you're using to geocode by. It will not help you. Okay, your address column should contain only the specific address. Don't include the city, state, and zip. We work in the city of Richmond. The addresses you have and you're trying to geocode, we already know they're all in Virginia. We know they're all already in the city of Richmond. It doesn't matter what the zip code is because we do not have repeating addresses in different zip codes in the city. So that information doesn't help you, and it will actually make it not possible to geocode. So don't include it in your address field. If you do have it, you can go ahead and put them in other fields, but the long and the short of it is don't use them, don't include them in your address field. They're going to cause problems. The system won't geocode them. Okay, a lot of times data will include intersection as an address, and those can be mapped. Here are some examples of intersections. You can use a connector using the @ sign or the ampersand. So just like addresses, geocoding is flexible and it supports varieties of spellings and data completeness. So for example, this is the same intersection in all 4 of these examples. They actually will all geocode. So here we have North 9th Street at East Broad. Here we've left out the street direction. Here we've left out the street type. And here we have a typo. Broad is not spelled properly. Well, a lot of times data we get, like information from the ABC licenses, I promise you, they didn't spell all the streets correctly. A lot of times there's typos. And geocoding is really smart. It has like a spelling index in it, and it can kind of figure out what is meant. So it doesn't have to be 100% perfectly spelled. So that is a really great thing about geocoding. So it'll do a best guess, and it will map this. Okay, let's talk about Excel files. If possible, I recommend you do not use Excel as your source. If you have an Excel file, you can export the worksheet to a CSV file format. The reason I don't recommend Excel is that a lot of times Excel introduces hidden data formatting that you don't see when you're looking at the table in Excel. But when ArcGIS Online tries to read that table, it's going to see those hidden formatting, and it's going to make decisions about what the field types are. So for example, when we geocoded those ABC licenses, the license numbers were numbers, but they weren't really like integers. But the system read the Excel table and stuck a comma. I don't know if you noticed, it stuck a comma in there and treated it like it was a number, but it should have been a text. So if you export to a CSV file format, then when you load the data, you will have this dialog where you get to decide what is the field type for each of your attribute fields. Excel doesn't give you this opportunity. Only the CSV reading will give you this opportunity to designate what is the field type. So if you're having problems, this is my recommendation. Export it out as a CSV file. A little background about this course. We created a geocoding course so that people could learn how to map their business data. And then we showed them how they can thematically map it. And then people wanted to know, what else can I do with this data? So for the remainder of the course, we'll show you some analysis techniques. But before we do that, let's review this slide number 16. We have an exercise that you should do on your own after you're done watching the video. We have the exact same ABC licenses table available to you, which I used to demonstrate geocoding with. So what we're going to want you to do on slide 16 is you can do a search in ArcGIS Online using the tag words geocode, download, training, and you will be able to find a table called Geocode Practice. And when you find it, you can download it. So we want you to download it to your computer. You should rename it something that is unique only to you, because we can't all geocode the same file name. In ArcGIS Online and within an organization, you can't have more than, you can't repurpose the exact same name on multiple items throughout the organization. Everything has to be uniquely named. So maybe just stick your last name in as part of the file name when you do the upload. But anyway, let me show you real quickly how you can find that. I'm going to jump out of this web map and get back into my workspace. So I'll go back to content. And by the way, here you can see my layer that got created in my folder. So to search for the table that we've made available for you, at the very top, there's a search. So up here is where you would type those keywords. What were those keywords? I can't remember what they were. Let me go back. Geocode, download, training. Okay, geocode, download, training. Okay, here it is. I entered that search keyword, and here's geocode practice. It's a table. Here is a Microsoft Excel table. So I'm going to click on it. And here you can see I can download this table. So that's what you'll do. You'll download it, and then you'll have your table available for you to use to geocode on your own. It'll be ABC licenses, but just pretend it's data that you work with. Be creative in your thought. Okay, I mentioned before that people wanted to learn how to do certain / common types of analysis with their point data. So what I'll demo in this section is how you can aggregate points by polygon areas. So what does that mean? Well, let's say in our example, we want to know how many ABC licenses are there by council district. So we can add up or aggregate the number of points by the council district's GIS layer. Because they are spatially coincident, the system is smart and it can do an overlay analysis to tell you that information. So let's see how to do that. This is a very common analysis. And the way it works is in your web map, there will be an analysis button. If you do not see the analysis button in your own web map, you should email us and we will update your role in ArcGIS Online so that you will be able to see the analysis button. Hopefully that setting is already available for you. So under analysis, there is an option called summarize data and aggregate points. For any of these analysis tools, you can always click on the information button, and then to the right, you'll get a description of how that analysis tool works and what it does. So let's do aggregate points. I'm going to jump into ArcGIS Online. I'll go back to my web map, so I got to go back to my content. And here's my folder I'm in. And we'll go to Steve's demo. I'm going to open my web map. And up here, you can see the analysis button. So I'll click on here. Here's the different kinds of analysis. So I want summarized data, aggregate points. I'm going to go back to my presentation and I'll be toggling back and forth. So when we click on that tool, here's what we'll be prompted with. We got to put in our point layer. The second option, what's your polygon layer going to be? So for us, we said we would do council districts. And then optionally, you can do field statistics. So if you have other attribute fields, you can include those in the summary of the points by area. So let's just pretend we don't have it, but let's pretend we did. Let's pretend we had the tax information by each licensed location. Well, we could summarize all the tax values from each of the points within the council district, and that will be included as an output statistic. So very powerful if you have integer attribute values. And then down here, you're going to be creating a new layer. So you're inputting 2 layers and you're outputting a new one that will contain your information. And of course, you should put the results in your project folder. We talked a lot about creating project folders and keeping your workspace nice and orderly. And here's something important to point out. By default, these tools have a check mark says use current map extent. So what that means is if you're zoomed in close somewhere in the city and you run this analysis with that checked on, it will only use the points and polygons that are in the current map view. It won't use the entire city. So by default, that check mark is there. So my advice is always remove that check mark before you run the analysis, just to be safe. It doesn't hurt anything. So let me go back. I'm going to choose I've got to get the, I'm missing the council districts layer. So I have to add that to the map first. Let me go back to search for layers. I'm going to add the council districts. I'm going to use the filter and go through my categories. So I'm interested in election districts. And I know council districts is an election district. So here it is. I'm going to add that to my map. Okay, I got both layers that I need. I got my polygon layer that I want to do summarize by, and I have my geocoded layer that I created earlier. Okay, those are the things we need. So let me go back to analysis and summarize doing aggregate points. So we're going to complete this by choosing what's the point layer. It was smart enough to know it's called Geocode Demo. What's the polygon layer? Well, I've only got 2 layers in my web map, so it was smart and it knew council districts was the layer. But if you have multiple layers, you can just use this to choose which one you want to use. Optionally, you can do additional statistics. We don't have any other attribute values that we're going to get additional statistics for. And down here, we'll have a new layer is going to get created. It has a very verbose name, so there's no doubt about what it is. You could rename this if you wanted. I'll just take the default, and I'm going to put it in my folder. And of course, I want to not use the current map extent, right? Because I've got data outside this map extent. So if I zoom out, see, I've got data down here. I want to make sure everything's included. So I'm just going to remove this check mark as a best practice. And now I'm going to run analysis. So while the analysis runs, you'll see the spinning blue wheel letting you know that the system is working on it. Hopefully this won't take too much time. We have close to we have 907 points. So it's got to go through every single one of those points, figure out what council district it's in, and then it's got to summarize and aggregate all the results together in order to output the result you requested. So we'll be patient while it processes. And I'll go back to the presentation in the meantime. So let's see what our next slide has in mind. The output is going to be a new polygon layer. And the system by default wants to use a counts and amounts symbol, which means there'll be a circle. The bigger the circle, the more points that were aggregated for that polygon. But that's just one way to map the data. We can map it another way by going to mapping the polygons with shaded colors. So I'll show you that once it's complete. So let me go back to ArcGIS Online and we'll see if it's done. Okay, it just finished. I'm going to turn off the points. Here you can see we have different size circles. The bigger the circle, the more licenses there were. So if we click on them, let me click on this one. We can see that the summary of Virginia licenses from February 2020, the number of points in Council District 5 is 125 licenses. Okay, so this is just one way to display the data, but I'm going to choose a different way. So I'll go back up and I'm going to go to symbolize. We talked about this in the intro class. And I'm going to map it by a color ramp. So the darker the color, the more licenses versus the lighter color ones. Okay, so there's different ways to map the information once you've summarized it by polygons. And of course, if we click on a polygon, let me turn these council districts off. If we click on a polygon, we see all the attributes. So the number of points, which means the number of licenses. Okay, pretty cool stuff. Let's go back and learn another analysis technique that's popular. Let's say you have geocoded a bunch of locations and you need to associate a geographic identity to each one of those points. So we'll stick with the council district example. We'll say every point needs to know what council district it's inside of. So we can do that. And you could do that with any GIS layer, right? You could take your points, you could overlay them with the neighborhoods layer, you could overlay them with, police precincts, school districts, whatever it is, and you could identify and associate every one of your point locations with a spatially related geography. So we're going to overlay the ABC licenses with the council districts. So how do you do that? Well, under the analysis tool, there and summarize data, there's an option called join features. Again, you could click on the information button and it will describe how that tool works. But essentially, it's going to do an overlay. It's going to take every one of those points, it's going to overlay it with your geography of polygons, and then output a new point layer. This is what the dialog will look like. So you got to put in your point layer, your polygon layer. What is the spatial relationship? So in the example I'm talking about, it would be intersect. The points intersect the polygon, but I'll show you that there's lots of different spatial relationships that can be analyzed. For the join operation, I'm going to accept the defaults. We'll call it a one-to-one. And the output name, I'm going to take the default. I'm going to put it in my folder, and I'm going to make sure I remove the use current map extent. So let's demo this. I've got my council districts, and I've got my geocode results. I'm going to go to analysis. I'm going to go to summarize, and I want to join features. So the point layer, the target layer, is going to be geocode demo. And the layer I want to join it with is the council districts. The spatial relationship is going to be, it could be intersect completely within or within a distance of. I just want to find the points that intersect the polygons. I'm going to keep the option 1-to-1. I'm going to take the default layer name, the output, but you could change this, call it what you want, and I'll put it in my folder. I'll make sure it runs on the full map extent, and I'm going to run my analysis. I'm going to guess that this analysis won't take as long to process as the aggregate one did. It has less work to do. All it has to do is take one point, figure out what district it's in, move on to the next one, spit them all out. There's no summarization that's going on. So while that's processing, I'll go back to the presentation and we'll catch up in a moment. So what this slide is showing you is the output, the results. So we'll have a new point layer. And if we were to look at the attribute table, it has all the original source data of the ABC licenses, but it also has the attributes from the polygon layer. So here's the council name. That will be new attribute field that's available. Okay, it's done. I'm going to turn off the geocode results, and I'm going to turn off the council districts. And let's click on one of these points. And we can see it's got the original ABC data. And it also has the attributes from the council district. So I know that this point is in the council district with the name 2. So the second council district. Okay, this one is in District 5, I believe. Yep, District 5. So sometimes you need to be able to associate those geographies with the data you were provided by address. And you know, it's fantastic that it's in GIS and you can thematically map it. You can create an interactive web mapping experience and share that with your customers, which is really, really great. But sometimes you need to be able to get that data spit out into a table format so you could create a report and give that to somebody. So the slideshow shows you that you can export the results as an Excel file. Sometimes you need to get the data out in tabular format. So ArcGIS Online doesn't export from the web map. What you have to do is go to the overview page for your new GIS layer that you created. And from there, there's an option called Export Data. So let me show you where that is. I'm going to save my work. I'm going to go back to my workspace. So I go back to Content. And look, in my project folder, I've got some new GIS layers in here, right? So this was the original one. Then I did the aggregation. So here's the aggregate one. And here's the latest one I did by just joining the features. So let's go to its overview page. Remember, everything in ArcGIS Online has an overview page. And here's the export data option. So let's export it to Excel. So you'll have to give it a name. It'll come up with a name of its own, but let's go ahead and say, oh, wait a minute, it's telling us that to export all the data, including recent changes, wait 10 minutes after editing before exporting the layer? Well, let's just give it a shot and see what happens. Actually, no, let's do this. Let's go back to my work and let's export the aggregation. Maybe it's been longer than 10 minutes. I don't know. Okay, let's export this one. I'm not going to worry about this message. We're going to call it Steve's export results. And for tags, I'm just going to call it demo summary. Steve is exporting results to a table. And I'm going to save this in my project folder. I got my fingers crossed that 10-minute warning really isn't the big issue. Okay, and now you'll see it takes you to your exported results overview page, and there is a download button. Let me go back to content. We can see what this looks like in my workspace. So here it is. Here's that Microsoft Excel table that I just created. It spit it out to my workspace, and now I can export it from the overview page. Here's the download button. So we can see down here at the bottom of my web browser are the results. All right, we are going to wrap things up. We have 2 more slides. You've seen this slide or a version of this slide many times. We've got our training curriculum here. So to put things in perspective, you've got an ArcGIS Online account. You've taken the Part 1 class. You have participated in the Part 2. You may have completed the online learning plan that we made available. And having done that, you've just completed the address mapping and geocoding course. We also have videos for how to make web apps in ArcGIS Online, and another one for how creating GIS layers in ArcGIS Online that you can take. We also have videos that will point you to where you can take an ESRI learning plan if you want to learn how to make story maps, or if you want to learn how to make dashboards. So what's next? A reminder, you can find a copy of this slide deck for geocoding for this course at this location. You can also find a link to all the slide decks from the orientation videos site. Make sure you go back and do exercise on slide 16. Practice geocoding using the ABC licenses file that you saw me use today. And please be sure to send us an email at dit-gis@richmondgov.com to inform our office that you have taken the address geocoding in ArcGIS Online.